Oh, Zarbix is here. Nice. I mean, in the chat.
Okay, now I've got... Man, that's weird. Okay, so sorry, Restream was having some kind of weird bug, but this will at least get us live, and now it's 100% working. Something weird's going on with YouTube system. So that's where they actually need to go, is that one. So sorry about that.
Alright, deal.
I will fix it, make it all look fancy later, but right now I'm just wanting to get us live. So that's where they need to go. And now we're working. Good grief. I don't know if it's Restream or YouTube, but something between them is not playing nice. Good grief. Okay, yes, now we're good. Okay, awesome, lovely. Hello, everyone. Give us just a hot sec to make sure we get everybody where we need to be. For whatever reason, it didn't like my preset one, but that's fine. We're live now. Yes, the title is going to be a little generic, but I'll fix it later after this draft. Let's just get live and get those questions going, which I know everyone's excited to see. Goodness! All right, give everyone just a hot sec, and then once we should be all set. I'm going to pop out chat so I can see y'all lovely. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. And, of course, Twitch is working perfectly because Twitch has a lovely system. Okay, so where am I getting audio from? Hello, everyone. I am Lore Master of Sotek. Lovely to see you all. I apologize for the weird little start there. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are all good now. If you're not familiar with me, I am one of the Warhammer Fantasy aficionados here on the internet. I spend a lot of time studying the lore behind the universe, and I was invited to come on here and be the host for this Q&A, and now that we've ironed out the kinks, we can finally get up and running. So, a couple things to go over before we really hash into it. For those unaware, we are having a Q&A session interview here with the developers of the Return of Reckoning project, which Return of Reckoning is a fan-made Warhammer Online private server that has been running for almost 7 years. It's a strictly free-to-play server with completely no way to purchase anything via in-game shop. The project's team is also strictly against any sort of direct or indirect donations. This is a purely lovingly crafted fan-made project. Tonight, I will be interviewing part of their team. We have the department leaders of Yali, Max, and War Grimner. We'll introduce them all and get them all a moment to say hello. Just here a sec. We've also
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're all good. And then we've got... So, actually, let's just go ahead and do that now. So, Yali, if you want to say hi, just so people can associate voice with name.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Wonderful. And then Max.
Hello, everyone.
Great. War Grimner.
Hey guys.
We've also got Dalen here.
Hello, hello.
And, of course, the project's communications officer, Gamesbond.
Hello.
We also were going to have another notable person with us tonight, Liana, the database department manager. However, unfortunately, due to an urgent, unexpected event, she couldn't make it. And then, when it comes to this Q&A session, the Return of Reckoning team has gathered loads of questions from the community, and dozens of topics will be discussed tonight, including reveals and exclusive information about upcoming content. While we're going through the Q&A, you guys those of you listening, can decide at the end which 3 questions you would like to see dug deeper into. And we'll essentially have a 15 minutes discussion around the picked topics. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start going into the questions. So, the first thing we've got is, let's start with Max or Yali, if either of you want to answer this. How did you decide to start the Return of Reckoning project, and what's the small and quick story behind it?
So for me, I had just started my first year of university, and it was coming up to the January sort of exam season. I was procrastinating, and I said to myself, I really want to play some Warhammer. I went to play, found out the game had shut down. I hadn't received any email about it at all. And thus began my journey to achieve my craving of just wanting to play some Warhammer. 6 months later, Yali, Dascoob, and I were ready to open Return of Reckoning to the public.
Yes, well, for me, it was a bit different when the shutdown has been announced. I've tried my best with few relationships to save some datas, with the hope to continue to play the game someday. It was strictly selfish from my side, because it was just to continue to play. So with Dascoob, we have met Necrosummoner who had the same ID, and later Max and some other, and we started Waremu, basing the project around the direct sandbox. And then, a few months later, Roar was here. That's all.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Then our next question, we're also tossing over to Max, which is, who is the ROR team, and how can you and do you efficiently keep up a project for over 6 years with a team that is quite literally scattered across the entire globe?
So, I mean, Return of Reckoning consists of an amazing group of people who have never known one another if it wasn't for, the goodwill and love of Warhammer Online. And it's created a sort of bond between us. And as a team, we are dedicated to continually improving the project.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And the last question I've got for you in this segment before we start branching off into other topics is, when it comes to, so let's talk about numbers, which is something that a lot of people ask about when they learn about this game. How many people are playing? How many people do you have going on? Can you share with us the approximate average number of new players joining the community every week? And what would you say is the average number of weekly active players?
So we don't necessarily keep track of those numbers apart from the number of sort of registered users, which is visible on the forums. If you click on the forums, you can see it at the bottom. So you could just watch that for a week to get an idea of how many that grows by. For weekly active players, we have worked it out in the past. I haven't worked it out recently, but from the top of my head, it's usually around 7,000 to 10,000 a month, sort of unique accounts logging in, with around over 1,500 usually a day at peak times concurrently. And I think I gave you a little chart so you can see from sort of the beginning is where we had the sort of the peak from Lazy Peon. And then it sort of died down. It goes up and down every week. So you can see those numbers.
Awesome, great. So we do have that up, so everyone in chat should be able to check that out for a little bit. And while they're kind of being able to see those numbers, which are impressive, it truly is wonderful to me personally, and I'm sure all of you, just to see how popular this game is, considering that it's kind of a niche area, being that it's a resurrection, of course, of a past game. But let's actually start to talk about some parts of the gameplay itself and some of the questions that people had about what's going forward, while also talking about the game's original design. So sticking with Max here, the original game, when it was good old Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning, back when it was live, had a truly terrible fort design, like legendarily bad. What are the Return of Reckoning's team's approach and actions taken to forts, and what are y'all's ideas and applications to make them a better experience for players?
So when Warhammer first launched, there was some serious performance issues, especially in Tier 4. Mark Jacobs recently spoke about this on a stream a few weeks ago on one of his Camelot Unchained streams. And I was actually speaking to one of the original server developers for the game not too long ago, and he said that in Forts, Destruction would be able to crash the server if they were losing, and if they were winning, Order would just crash the servers. So they had to remove them from the game. A major feature of the game had to be removed, which is quite crazy. From what I heard, once they had everything sort of optimized, they could handle around 3,600 concurrent players on a server, with around 1,000 people per sort of region, which would be, for example, the Empire Chaos Tier 4 areas, and around 700 people in a battle. Then they decided they could bring forts back, but they weren't quite like they were. They changed them a lot, very different. So we didn't have any of the original server code, so we rebuilt the servers from the ground up. We've had over 3,900 people connected currently, over 1,200 in the zone, possibly higher, with battles with over 800 people easily. The client doesn't really like it when we have too many people in the same area, though. So we can handle the big fort battles with ease, which was the first hurdle. Now that issue is out of the way, we can just look at how to change the mechanics to make them more fun. Like not making about the funnel in the Lord's Room, because that's where it seems to end up a lot of the time. And we've got plenty of epic ideas up our sleeves, and it's just down to time.
Great, and it's definitely good to hear that y'all are addressing a lot of those really popular things that are, issues of the Fort experience, especially when it comes to the Lord Room swarms. But let's check in with Dalen or Wargrimner, if either of y'all would like to jump in on this. Are there any new features coming to forts when we look to the future? For instance, are we going to maybe see more siege weapons or new ways to just interact for players to participate within sieges?
I can dive into that a bit. I'm Dalen. So we just released just the other week the flyers in stage 3, which is kind of a similar feature to what existed in OpenRVR on Live, where you could, on certain keep ranks, you could fly between the keeps. But we've added them to the stage 3 in Fort, so you can fly up to the top floors and kind of also attack from that to divert a little bit from just kind of funneling. But we have also looked into adding other stuff like, siege towers, potentially having like large monsters that could, throw players or perform other stuff in sieges and, make them more epic in ways. But there's some missing pieces for that. There's like artwork missing for siege towers to really work. Currently we really only have like destruction siege towers, for example. And also like the details of how it's gonna exactly work isn't completely hashed out yet. But we're definitely looking into how to make them better and more fun.
And Secrets had a comment on this as well. He said the flyers were the result of the Orcapult concept, but more practical. The opening cinematic showed their power at best. And siege towers were amazing in Dark Age of Camelot from a design perspective and fit thematically here. So he's definitely interested in that coming into fruition.
Yeah, and we would like them to be more of a kind of epic finale to the regular campaign and be feel like more of an epic siege. The sieges in Total War Warhammer can feel a bit more epic, even though they're mostly the same, most of them. But
well, yeah,
maybe a bit repetitive.
They've kind of got their own problems to sort over there. But I gotta say, I'm super excited by the idea of siege towers. Like being able to take the battles from just kind of running around trying to catch people going in through the port gates, and actually maybe seeing conflicts on the walls and having people actually fighting, not just in narrow entrances, would add just a completely new dynamic to those siege battles, which would be really exciting.
Yeah. So that's definitely something we would like to do, but it takes some time to implement for sure. So it's a question of time as well.
That that does seem to always be the case when it comes to messing with video games, doesn't it? But let's go ahead and move on to talking about balancing and reworks ideas or questions, shall we say? So, putting War Grimnir here in the spotlight, are there any balance changes coming forward, or maybe when y'all make them in general? Are they based on when you're looking to balance? Are you looking at warband data? Are you looking at solo experiences, 6v6, or are those unrelated to when you're making those balance decisions?
So historically, balance changes have been intended for anywhere from 6v6 to warband plus. I could stop with that answer and not say anything else, but I'm going to give some people some things to think about instead. We've grown to refine balance and optimize more classes. There's also room for balance changes that are thematic in nature or lean on features in the client that we didn't have access to before. A good example of this is the rework for Disciple of Cain and Warrior Priest. There wasn't any particular reason that they needed to have a shield spec, but for Warrior Priest, there was a particular fit for the thematic. And since Disciple of Cain is essentially a result of Warhammer Online, we felt it was not that much of a stretch to give them the same thing. Squig Herder sort of leads us into the official cinematic videos, which we consider canon for balance, several different reasons. Their original design for Melee Squig was underutilized throughout most of the live server's time. Identifying what it was that made Melee Squig needed in order to be effective and fill that power fantasy that the cinematic captured guided many of the decisions around those particular changes. Another example can be found in client files. The original designs of different classes and class builds from beta in large part still exist in those files. Some of these have animations or ability icons that simply have gone unused throughout the entire life of the server. Things like that are always interesting to craft new theories around. I also have to mention this aspect as well. A lot of the reasons that we decide to initiate balance changes for a specific class usually have to do with discussions that go on within the community. I can't tell you how many times things come up because there's some hot thread of the forums and people get distracted from our direction for balance in pursuit of a perceived immediate need. It's not necessarily directly related to a change we made. Then it wouldn't necessarily be a priority issue for us, but we do look at and listen to all that stuff.
Well, and that's great to hear. I think there's nothing more reassuring for any community than knowing that especially when they're discussing in official areas like forums, that there are devs reading over those and keeping a tab, especially when issues become extremely popular. So it's awesome to hear that y'all, have that third eye watching that even when you're trying to work on your own plans. But speaking of kind of reworking characters and trying to get them closer to the way that maybe people would want to see them work, especially based on older cinematics or just the way they were promised to have worked in live and didn't necessarily turn out right. Let's talk about the Sorcerer. Do y'all have any plans in the near future to rework it and improve how it functions? It seems that a lot of the community believes that there's just a massive disparity between the Sorcerer and its opposing member being the Bright Wizard.
Do you want to go first, Grimnir?
Mine's really long. You can go first.
Yeah, sure. So we think that they're in a fairly good spot. The Sorcerer is probably has the edge when it comes to single target damage, while Bright Wizard has the edge for AoE damage. So we might do some slight tweaks, but we're not planning any reworks of them.
So I can reassert that we don't have any current plans for Sorcerer or Bright Wizard. And answering questions about whether we have plans for specific classes usually implies that we have some sort of overarching goal that we're trying to get them to reach. I believe Sork and Bright Wizard are very entrenched in what they do. For the most part, they do it quite well. Any changes that might come to either of those classes would be relatively small in nature. But there is a second part of this question. There's this implication that class balance is being done to affect outcomes on each realm. That can't be further from the truth. Class balance is not a tool that we use to resolve RVR dominance from one side or the other. It's not to say that class balance isn't a factor in realm dominance. During any patch cycle, there could be any number of balance changes to any number of classes. They could be big or small. And if your realm is adapting and reacting and changing strategies and tactics as balance changes roll through, then you're going to find yourself to be more successful. There's also a frequent appeal to balance affecting mirrored classes. One of our goals with balance changes is to have less mirroring going on where possible. There's quite a few examples of classes that are pretty blatant copies of each other, and it's challenging to untangle those in meaningful ways that allow both of them to exist with the same efficacy for the realm. However, the point that I'm making is that classes, first and foremost, need to be judged from the perspective of themselves, whether they are filling the intent of the class and masteries that they have. Then we consider how the position exists in their realm and compare to classes they're going to compete with for position in a group. And if there's still room for doubt or insight, we can look at the mirror class on the other side.
So on this one, Secrets wanted to add, isn't Zarbix powerful enough? Jokes aside, I have worried about their mobility. They're incredibly good at dealing damage and are monsters at pug farming when guarded in a proper 2-2-2 6-man group. They aren't great at receiving damage, but that's just the nature of the class. The metagame will always form around the flavor of the month class.
Fair enough. I really appreciate those are some very detailed answers. Thank you all very much. So, moving on from the sorcerer, we do have a question here aimed for War Grimner about the ranged squig herder. There have been rumors about a potential rework here and there, but could you give us any kind of confirmation on whether or not there will be an actual rework coming for the ranged squig herder?
Yes. There is a rework coming for Ranged Swigger. In the past 2 weeks, we started the process of accumulating all the data points and suggestions and proposals from various team members and from the Balanced Discussion Forum, where we ask people to put their proposals in a good format. I don't think that'll be out with the next patch. It's going to be fairly extensive. I don't think we're doing as much as we did with Shadow Warrior. We want to do a bit more testing. We kind of expect that we're going to miss some things anyways. It just sort of happens when you go through balance changes like this. I'd hope to see some things implemented and on the live server by the end of November.
Awesome. That's very exciting to hear. I'm sure all of the squig herders are really looking forward to it, and I'm probably going to have a bad time with it with them shooting at me.
That being said, though, with the ranged squig herders and so on, I mean, we have done some pet changes that have kind of, especially lately, that have indirectly benefited the ranged squig herder, where we changed changes to some mechanics, like when the pet is distant from you, it deals full damage, and that it gets crit stats from items are also given to the pets, and renown training also affects pets as well now. So there's been some other changes that are just general changes that have indirectly benefited the ranged squig herders.
Wonderful. And let's keep pressing forward here. We've got one more question when it comes to the balance and rework section, which is for Dalen. And we have a community questions. Are there any future plans, even if they're a little more in the distant future, but are there any plans to address the archmages and the goblin shamans?
Yes, so I mean, this is probably even more in the future. I mean, we have the current class mechanic of the archmage and shaman was kind of envisioned as a hybrid role where you would alternate between healing and damage abilities. But I mean, in practice, that doesn't really work that well. It's usually much more effective to focus on one of those two. So the class mechanic doesn't really benefit them that much. The only real benefit they get from it is getting better healing spells when they're in the DPS spec, really. We have some ideas for changes to the class mechanic and make it fit the class better, but it's kind of more draft proposals, really. And Mythic also had a kind of draft proposal for a new class mechanic for them that they circulated on the forums many years ago now. But I mean, that was never implemented at all. But it has some interesting ideas we could maybe borrow from.
Okay, great. So that's something to kind of look for on the distant horizon. But, at least it's thought about, and hopefully it'll something we'll get to look forward to one day. But let's keep pressing forward. It's time for us to focus a little bit. Let's take a break and kind of pull away from the balance stuff and talk about mounts and cosmetics, which I know is something I'm very passionate about. So, Max, we haven't heard from you in a minute. Are there any chances of us getting new mounts in the near future? The same speed, same dismount rate and all that, but just getting new, different lore-friendly skins, and maybe even having like premium costs so they can kind of really be flashy things to have and show off in the community.
So we would absolutely love to be able to read through the lore and find every interesting thing we can stick a player on top of. However, doing so would undergo quite a long process. Okay. Firstly, you need to sort of create the 3D model of that mount. Then we need to create a skeleton and then rig the model to it, which is basically defining how the skin of the monster moves with the bones. And then we need to create animations for all of the different motions it makes, running, jumping, moving slowly, and sort of things like that. And while that is a lot of work, we don't necessarily have the tools to do all of those things. We can definitely do some of them. But when it comes to having new skins for mounts, yes, that's something we can do, and it's something we have considered. Although there is a limiting amount of colors that we could make, a pig or a griffin.
Fair enough. And that's kind of one of the I imagine the major limitations to this particular, I don't want to call it experiment, but this experience is probably a better phrase, is kind of having to work with the tools that y'all still have kind of lying around in order to implement new things into such a dated but wonderful project. But kind of in the same vein, Max, if you'll indulge me, could we potentially see guild heavily armored mounts become more expensive, but they have the advantage of becoming permanent?
So this kind of follows on from the last question when it comes to sort of temporary mounts. We only have a handful of spare mount models in the game. There's some really cool unfinished ones that Mythic made, but they don't have any animations. I wish I'd got a picture ready to show you. And the problem comes if we give out too many permanent mounts, we have no mounts to use for events and things, which is why we've opted for reusing the mounts and letting players have them temporarily. But it's possible we could do something with the guild mounts in the future. It's something we're looking at.
Great. Well, that's exciting to hear, because it's kind of the temporary mounts are very exciting, but it's always kind of that weird thing where you're like, man, I really wish I could find a way to have like this permanent golden shiny thing to enjoy. And it kind of leads into our next question, though we're going to be looking to Games Bond for this one, which is I imagine it's going to be a similar answer, but just to have a public clarification on it, could you clarify for us why the Twitch drop mounts that we've been seeing in the Twitch drop events are not permanent like the other rewards you can get during those events?
Yeah, sure. This question basically has been asked many times and since the start of the Twitch drops events, and the logical reason behind this is the mounts that are introduced in the Twitch drops are basically the stars of the event. So we shape the event rewards based on these mounts. By that I mean we consider the mounts the optimal reward that players would aim to get. And since we have a limited number of functioning mounts, as Max was saying, we cannot really give every single mount and make it a permanent Twitch drop reward.
Yeah, and when you consider that in compared to the pets we give out, which are permanent pets, Mythic had a cash shop to buy the pets, so there's about 120 pets in the game, so we have a lot of them to use. Whereas if they would have had, a cash shop for mounts, there'd probably be a lot more mounts that we could use, but that wasn't the case.
Kind of a opposite of the usual double-edged sword experience when it comes to paid-for mounts there, huh? So, Max, the last question we have when it comes to talking more about just cosmetics, kind of stepping away from mounts, is so we kind of discussed the difficulties to adding new mounts into the game due to the skeletal structure issues, which is common across a lot of games that want to add in new playable features like that. But what about when it comes to things like gears or items or gear or skins? How is that looking? Is that just as difficult? Is it a little easier? What are we looking at on the cosmetic side of things?
So you have to consider that Warhammer uses a lot of third-party sort of asset pipelines. It used the Game Brio model format, but it also uses a system called Emotion FX for animations, and they all have completely different custom pipelines. The armor models and textures is completely custom mythic sort of stuff, which it had the special ability to be able to dye your armor, which is was unique at the time. And whilst we've been able to add our own textures, such as the Spider's Web Halloween cloak, and models such as all the new weapons we added, creatures are a bit more complex. And we've managed to rig new models to existing skeletons, so we can add a new pair of boots to a player model. But creating the new sort of skeletons and animations is not something we have working at a level that we can just give to artists to sort of make. So we can sort of add gear to the game, and it might come slowly, but then we have to get a load of artists to create that gear. So if you're an artist and you like making gear, it's something we can look into.
Awesome. So for those of you who are artists in the community, that could be a way to kind of participate in a game that you really, really love, if that's something you'd maybe want to reach out to the devs on their Discord server or the forums about. So let's keep pressing forward. And Max, we're kind of stepping into a topic of discussing questions for new players, people who either are not familiar with Return of Reckoning, maybe they played it while it was live and they're trying to come back, or maybe they're just a fan of the Warhammer community, they've been brought in by Total War or one of the other games going on, and they have no idea what's going on, and they kind of want to know about this experience. If you were, so putting yourself into the shoes of a new player, do you feel that this is a good time to actually get involved? If you've played the game when it was live, is this the best time to come in right now? Are things really good and popping, so to speak?
Well, I would ask myself the following questions. Do I like Warhammer? Yes. Do I like MMORPGs? Yes. Do I like to run around kicking squigs off bridges, smashing the living snot out of each other? Yes. But on a serious note, over the past year, we've had many small bugs that have been fixed, improved server performance, fixed quests, to the point where it's all very smooth now from the starter experience. We have someone that's been going through every quest for every zone to get them all working again. So it's been a long process. There are a lot of quests in the game. So yeah, there's lots of time to explore.
Yeah, and I will add my own voice to that, of saying that as someone who played during live and came back a while ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, to Return of Reckoning, but really started playing much more actively in probably the last year, it is a really excellent time to come back, especially if you played the game when it was live. But even if you're brand new and you just like Warhammer, it's kind of shocking how much more fluid of an experience it was, even than during live, at least in my opinion. But to move on to the next question we have from the community, and this one's kind of pertinent, I think, even to veteran players, not just new folks, but are there any plans to make the process of leveling alt characters, or just creating lots of alts, to be a much more pleasant experience, or at least easier to manage?
So whilst we've mentioned the idea of helping with catch-up mechanics in terms of gear, we've also considered doing times two events for sort of low-level characters. So if you've just created your character in this ×2 event, your new characters, your new alts will be able to get ×2 XP. So it should be a big boost to the sort of tier 1 moving up. So we'll have a big group of players moving up through the levels at the same time. And I think that would be a great opportunity to get people involved. I think Wargrim has got some extra stuff to say about this.
Yep, we have several times, pretty much every time that we expanded the power scaling of the game. We've gone back to the lower tiers and sort of revamped how much everything costs as far as RVR gear, scenario weapons, things like that, just to make sure that people that are coming up have it a little bit easier than the people before them. And that's something that we will regularly go back through and review. We don't have any current plans to do so at the moment, however.
Okay, but it's good to know that y'all are looking at it, especially because I know I'm one of those people that I get really tempted to just constantly be making characters and careers I haven't tried yet, or just really enjoy that experience of leveling a new character. You just get a lot of dopamine hits from getting all those dings, and certainly having the experience smoothed out a little bit, especially for people leveling alts, whether they're in a guild and they just need to fill in certain roles to maybe have more people available for RVR dungeons. It's good to know that there might be something on the horizon for that in the future. But let's speaking of the overall leveling experience, but focusing more on the RVR side of things, for Dalen and Wargrim, whichever one of y'all wants to go first on this, what can we get a official statement about what is y'all's stance on some of the community pushing for having 3 tiers instead of kind of 2 right now? So having tier 1 being ranks 1 through 15, tier 2 then being ranks 16 through 39, and then tier 4 just being 40.
Yeah, so I mean, so that's we have it in those like 3 tiers in the scenarios, and we have. I mean, we don't have any immediate plans to change it in RVR, but we have discussed like the possibility of doing the same kind of divide and splitting off the tier 2 zones to be level 16 to 39. Not at all decided if we will do that or not. And it's a bit of work. And I mean, we also like to have, more zones and more content available to level 40 players, which is where you, spend the majority of the time playing. And if we would do that, we would probably still keep the ability to go into tier 4 zones when you hit 16 and get bolstered, so you can still play there. So that makes it more questionable how the population would be in those, pure tier 2 zones.
The expansion of RBR into the tier 2 and tier 3 zones wasn't only to keep population high by including the mid-tier level ranges either. It's also to use the full extent of the maps for the main gameplay loop, which is RVR. While it might seem like you can just hit a few variables and change how RVR works, it's actually a lot more complex and written by several generations of devs who have come and gone. Existing code that works is valuable, and refactoring existing code can have dangerous consequences and unexpected results. So changing the RVR system as a whole in this manner would be a significant use of development time for a payoff that serves a relative minority of players and removes significant amounts of content from regular use for the majority of the player base.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the detailed answer, and hopefully that can kind of settle a lot of the people who've been requesting answers on that particular topic. So, Dalen, if you will, we have a question here from the community that obviously we can't get into the hardcore specifics about the contribution system and how it calculates how much everyone's contributing in whatever mode of the game they're indulging in at the moment. Just because we don't want, if you have all the details out there, inevitably people are going to exploit it. But could you give us at least a basic window into that system? How much do healers and tanks get as much contribution as damage dealers? What are the basic factors that each of those different roles are having calculated to determine their contribution?
Yes, I mean, we try to make it pretty fair between them, but technically we don't really have like one contribution system. We actually have 4 different ones. So it's like public quests has one, open RVR has one, and forts and cities have their own contribution systems as well. And the public quests and open RVR probably have the more kind of advanced contribution systems, whereas the ones in forts and cities are a little more simple. But they all try to be fair between the different roles, and so they all reward you for doing your role, but they also reward you for like, completing the objectives. But also in RVR we have changed it to be like so that the contribution you do have play a bigger part, and the random roll at the end is plays a smaller part in your total score. And well, once we've improved the contribution systems in cities and forts and so on, we might shift them more in that direction as well, to be like more about contributing and less about being lucky.
Well, that's good to hear, especially when it comes to cities. I think a lot of people will definitely be looking forward to when those systems have an opportunity to really be deeply hashed out. Popping back over to Max, we have, I think, a good earnest question from the community, which is, for players who are wanting to do what they can to be an active part of the community, support you guys, and help in whatever way they can to support the game, what is the easiest and best way for them to support Return of Reckoning?
So there's sort of plenty of ways that people can sort of help. One thing we really struggle with is recovering, quest text, public quest information, Tome of Knowledge information. The goal has been to recover the information and implement the quests like they were on live, so that the people who spent years of their lives making these quests can log in one day and say, "Hey, I made that." And a lot of the quest data we have recovered whilst the game was still live, but not all of it. Some we've recovered from watching the worst quality YouTube videos from the 2000s. Some we have recovered from archives of Warhammer Online databases. Some will be locked in a vault somewhere, in some game publisher's warehouse. So if you played live and you have your old computer sitting in your loft, check if you still have your screenshot folder. It may be the only place some of this information still exists. And if you do find any of this information, we'll be putting a link for you somewhere to follow. We're particularly looking for kill collector quest information, as due to the way these worked, we don't have a lot of the data for them. But also, if you're a 3D artist, you can come help out. We're going to be opening up the wiki. I'm going to talk about that a bit later. And we don't take any monetary, contribution at all. But yeah.
Right.
And I've just posted the link in the chats for the people if they want to contribute.
Okay, great. I will... Cool, so I see that in that chat, and I'm going to also move it over to Twitch chat so they can check it out too. But, so now, I think chat is very eager for us to get to some of the really, really exciting questions. So let's go ahead and dive into the potential of new things on the horizon. So, Max, let's start with you. Are there any plans to bring Karazakarak and Karak 8 Peaks as fully functional cities like we have with Altdorf and the Inevitable City?
Right. So, if you didn't already know, Karazakarak and Karak 8 Peaks were in development at Mythic and were cut before the open beta. Karazakarak was even available to visit during the closed beta, and there are a couple of people who may remember it. There's a screenshot that I think I sent you that you said you could pull up. Yep. So that's from the beta of the game. It's one of the only screenshots that I've seen of it. But Mythic decided, instead of having 6 medium-sized cities, to just create 2 mega cities. This could have been due to time restrictions or change in how they designed the rest of the game. And you can see how they originally planned Altdorf and the Inevitable City, how they planned it to look. They were much smaller and completely different layouts, probably a bit more lore-friendly. So I think I've sent you another picture.
Yeah, we got Altdorf up now, and we'll switch to Inevitable City in a hot
That's
minute.
actually not Altdorf. I've sent you the wrong one.
Oh.
So switch to the next one. That's
here, we got the Inevitable City with us.
Yeah, so this was meant to be the Inevitable City. As you can tell, it looks absolutely nothing like it actually ended up looking.
Goodness, this
let me
looks
just
confusing.
find. Yeah, well, it's sort of in the name, and part of its design. I'm just uploading. I will send you the link quickly. Yep, that's the link to the other one. If you've got Discord open.
Oh, sure. I'll pull that up. Why don't you continue to talk about it?
Yep. So if you ever visit the old Warhammer Online website that still exists, there's a letter from Carrie Guskos, who was a producer at the time, who said, "There are many memories like this, ones that I feel comfortable sharing now, including the fact that we do have 2 of the 4 remaining fully built cities, Karazakarak and Karak Peach, which are truly beautiful, but will take months and months of optimization before they can match the changes made to the game along the way." So as you can see, Altdorf looks absolutely nothing like it does now. And it actually has a train station that goes to Karazakarak, and I think there's something that goes to the Elf City somewhere. And so we actually spent some time looking at what needed doing. So if you wanted to do it properly, you would need to sort of place all the pieces of the city together, because they're all in separate sort of objects, build the NPCs, gear them all up, create the interaction text when you talk to them, design quests for the cities, implement the quests, because Altdorf and the Inevitable City have over 400 quests between them. Create the public quests, creating sort of props to put in the cities, because there's not a lot of those for dwarves or greenskins. Drawing the sort of maps that when you push the M key that pop up. Drawing the loading screens, because some of them have, there's beautiful art on those loading screens. You've got to create the audio for the area. So when you go into, a bit where there's vendors, you would hear coins rattling, or you go into the pubs and you'd hear, bottles of beer being opened. And you've got to expand the cities to sort of match the size of the Altdorf and the Inevitable City are now, which includes more 3D modeling, texturing more stuff. And while this does open the opportunity to have, city sieges for these 2 cities, which would be amazing, and probably, make the campaign what I think Mythic probably wanted it to be. And you could also have more city dungeons, and there's lots of dwarf-related ventures that I wouldn't mind going on. But then we have to consider, do we have to build the High Elf and Dark Elf cities? Because otherwise they'd be left out. And if we had the tools to create the terrain or import the models or generate the lighting for maps, it would make this process, 10 times easier. So it's not something... it's a long process if we wanted to see this come together. And I think I have a video that I sent you, which includes a few years ago, one of our team members, Londo, released a video of parts of the city. So you could sort of play those through.
Sure.
So you can see what they looked like. So here you can see the Temple of Valya, I think how you say it.
Yeah, Valya.
And there we go. So a lot of these models are sort of unfinished. So this is the sort of the vault. You can see a lot of concept artwork, which these were based on. That was released by Mythic. A lot of them have issues where if you stand in certain areas of the model, things just disappear from your screen. Here we have the sort of throne area. There's no throne, but you can see sort of the vibe they were trying to give off with this.
My God, this is beautiful.
Yeah, it could have been fantastic. So the dwarf city is very much, there's more there. It's more complete. They had it in the open beta. Here's the main forge area. So you've got the Great Forge, I suppose, in this massive room. But if you walk in there in the game at the moment, you'll just hear dead silence. There's no audio set up for this sort of area. There's no fires. Every fire would have to be placed. Every bit of sound for those fires. Every bit of light. So when you stand next to it, the light shines on your character. And here we have what I'd assume is the Anvil of Doom. It looks like the miniature does. Anyway, it's got the same sort of runic patterns on it. With even the little forge that the sort of miniature comes with.
Oh yeah, it is based on Thoric Ironbrow's model. Look at that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, and you can see the lava below. It's probably not the best lava in the game, but who looks down there? Here they have sort of rooms for each of the races. So this would be the Empire one. So each race would have their own of headquarters, which is how I think they planned for it to be. So there is also a dwarf one and a elf one. So this is the main sort of. There's a big chasm, which just behind those big gates that they had, when you walk up to it in Stonewatch, you'd go through to here, and this is where that screenshot that you showed earlier is looking down from the left straight towards that. And as you can see, there's sky everywhere. That's because the models aren't put together in this video. So there's sort of 5 branches over this massive chasm. You can imagine there'll be fire roaring from those. Yeah.
Gotta say, unfortunately, almost, they had some very ambitious moves with this game. A little too ambitious.
So this is from a room that would be in the Greenskin City, which is Karak 8 Peaks, which was meant to have fallen to, I think in Warhammer, it was the Bloody Sun Boys in Warhammer Online. They released a little comic before the game was released. I think it was in the collector's edition pack. So this was one of the sort of rooms in it. There's a few more. These rooms are very much not as finished as the dwarf ones were. So, and this is a model that no one would have seen if you were in the beta or not. And this is the brewery for Karazakarak. Can walk around. There's barrels. You can't go past the gate, but it looks pretty cool, and it just goes to show what could have come from the game if they'd finished that stuff. They'd spent 6 more months implementing it.
Ugh, that's heartbreaking to look at. Absolutely heartbreaking. All right, so let's move on from that before we all have to start dabbing our tears away with our beards. So, Dalen, when it comes to talking about new things that may be implemented into the game, do y'all have any plans to add in new tactics? And what about bringing back the Tome and Renown tactics, but especially the Tome of Knowledge tactics that you got from doing all the really weird and secretive quests?
Yeah, so for Tome tactics, yes, we will probably bring them back. For Renown tactics, we probably won't. I mean, the bit longer answer would be that, with Tome tactics, until recently, even if we implemented the actual tactics, until fairly recently, you wouldn't really have been able to get them anyway, because most of the Tome unlocks to be able to get them weren't implemented. There's still a bunch of them that aren't implemented yet, but at least most of them are now. With Renown tactics, in the beginning, there was a lot of different Renown tactics, and you had to pick 2 of them. Bonuses, so there was an actual choice there and kind of trade-offs and so on. And then Mythic revamped how the Renown system, the Renown training system, worked in patch 1.3.5, I think. And then in patch 1.4, they reintroduced some Renown tactics for RR90 and RR100 that were just big power creep Renown tactics. But we're fairly happy with how the Renown training system works, so we'll probably not go back to the original one. I think the current one is good, so we don't really see the need for them. For regular tactics, though, we might revamp a whole bunch of them. There's some good ones, but there's quite a lot of pretty bad regular career tactics, and we might revamp some of them to be a bit more worth plotting.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. I know I'm super excited at the idea of Tome tactics coming back. Even though they don't do anything, I still love hunting for those. Even right now, I sometimes will get on privately and go track some of them down. But our next question coming in from the community as far as potential new content is y'all have been doing a really good job of having slowly but surely bringing back various scenarios and giving people a good mix of things to try. Is there any chance we might see even more, especially perhaps even the unreleased scenarios that didn't make it on live? Is there a chance we could see those becoming playable on Return of Reckoning?
Yes. So, we have been bringing some of them back. Definitely. There's still one scenario from live that we haven't implemented yet at all, which is Grovewood Caverns. the Skaven themed one. But we're a little bit unsure if we're gonna like implement it exactly as it was on live, which was basically like a bomb runs and mechanic, like Talabek Dam or something, which isn't really like a very popular mechanic anyway. So it had some extra bits to it, but that was the basic gist of it. So I mean, we might bring that map back, but with a different mechanic. And speaking of Talabek Dam, we have also discussed some revamps of that and possibly a different mechanic for it, but on the same map. Then there's also like the city siege scenarios that kind of go on when there's city sieges that we have done a very rough implementation of so far. We haven't really implemented the full mechanic of them. But then there's also like 3 different unreleased scenario maps that some of them might have been available in like the closed beta or something, but most people probably haven't seen them. It's the Catherine Valley Pass and Castle Fragendorf. And then there's one that doesn't even have a name, but it's an elf map. And I mean, to be frank, they're not that great maps. Like, you can kind of tell why they cut them from the game. So, I don't know, if we can think up a good mechanic for them that would be fun, then yeah, we might implement them and put them into the game. But yeah, the maps themselves definitely has some flaws. Then there's also the possibility of taking maps from Wrath of Heroes and put into the game, because they actually use kind of the same formats.
Oh, that could be very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. But then it's also a little bit unclear what the exact mechanics would be, as they're kind of designed for 3 different teams instead of just 2. So,
and you can sort of tell what they. So there's 2 that are, I think, unique. Some of them were Warhammer scenarios that had been adjusted to 3 players, but they added the Pyramid of Cetra, which is a 3-person, 3-team. So there's 3 points to it, which we've managed to load into Warhammer Online. And there's also the Garden of Moor, which is another one that they had, which was a vampire counts themed one. So you could tell that they were working on something vampire counts before the game disappeared.
Oh, the poor teases of what could have been. So let's start with Dalen on this next question, and then we'll go to War Grimnir. But Dalen, here's a pretty popular question that's often asked about. Are there any plans to release the somewhat infamous Sovereign weapons?
Yes, eventually. We will. But I think that we need to release like another tier of PvE weapons first, and potentially some upgraded scenario weapons. Because I mean, currently they're kind of like 1 tier behind the RVR weapons already, so it would be good to get another tier of PvE weapons out before getting another tier of RVR weapons out. So, like Hunter's Whale or Lost Whale weapons.
Awesome. Well, that's very exciting to hear. War Grimnir, anything to add on to that?
Yeah, just we're going to have a suitable occasion to introduce sovereign weapons to at some point in the future. Definitely a part of the game that we're holding on to for right now. All this stuff, when we release new content, is usually when you'll see new items get put into the game. So we want to make sure that we have stuff available when we release new content, so you guys have that secondary reason to play it. Not everybody just does it because it looks nice.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the answers on that. I'm sure a lot of people are excited to see those weapons arriving, and I know I'm definitely perking up at the sound of more PvE items and such. Which, speaking of PvE, Max, this is a question I am super interested to hear about. What's coming next from you guys in that potential realm? Is there a chance we could see the return of some of the popular dungeons? I even see people in chat bringing them up right now, of the Hunter's Vale, the Lost Vale, maybe even the Land of the Dead.
So some work has been done on all three of these. We have some of the public quests working in the Land of the Dead. And we have a lot of things spawned and ready to be scripted in the Lost Vale. We're currently scripting the boss logic on bosses from Hunter's Vale. And Hunter's Vale was one of the last dungeons. I think it was the last dungeon they released in one of the last content patches they did. And they really had time to sort of show off the things that they could do, right? So they had the tree twin boss mechanics where you would attack one, it'd go to a certain % health, and then the other one would activate and unfreeze. And then they had the puzzle where once you killed the lion bosses, you would have to do this sort of runestone puzzle with stepping on stones that matches the things. And both of those we currently have working on our system. We're just going through all the bosses, making sure we get most of the mechanics all down and working, and then tying it all together so we have a consistent playthrough of them. One of the sort of long processes comes to scripting the bosses, how the mechanics work. We have to create the abilities they use. I think some of the bosses in Hunter's Vale, they do some quite cool stuff, like running into portals, disappearing, teleporting to somewhere else, and then coming out of a portal. Lost Vale would be coming up after that. Land of the Dead, some of the public quests are working, but we're really waiting for the rest of the dungeons to catch up so we can have Tomb of the Vulture Lord working, and then we can finish the public quests. And I mean, we are considering doing something else with the RVR with Land of the Dead, because some people consider it not the sort of best use of the zone, and we're not sure how we're going to make it activate yet, but it's coming soon. TM.
Oh, it's very exciting to hear. Man, I'm so looking forward to Lost Vale. I never got to beat that when it was live, so I'm really looking forward to finally being able to check that off my life goals list. But so yeah, that's some of the things that those of you in the community can look forward to showing up in the near to far future, which is all very, very exciting. But now we've got a couple of questions about the community itself. So GamesBond, if you would, could you tell me about the community is kind of wondering, would there be any interest for y'all promoting community events that are made by the players or held and utilized by the players, such as 6v6, 3v3, or even 1v1 tournaments?
Basically, as a team, like we surely highly appreciate community events and the tournaments they do and they organize. However, we can actually support them because once as a team we support one player who made a tournament, we have to support another one who created a tournament maybe a few months later, and then we have to support another one. So it's basically it drags on, and this actually comes with a lot of complications, especially if one or more tournament had some issues and player conflicts, and so we don't really want to get the team into these complications.
That's fair enough. So while y'all do encourage people to keep doing them and indulging in them, official support is just kind of a murky, best not step into that puddle. But definitely keep them up out there if y'all are participating or hosting and enjoying those. So hopping over to Max for a minute, let's talk about the wiki. Are there any plans to really go in there and clean it up and update it?
So the wiki has sort of been one of these low-hanging fruits that we've kind of been put off for a while. Currently, it's the only thing on one of our old web servers. So we will need to be moving that over to our new web server, which we've been using for probably around a year and a half. And we're looking to, because at the moment only sort of approved people can edit it, and that happens quite slowly. Although the people that do, we really appreciate the work they do. But we're thinking of opening it up a bit more, possibly having, if you reached a certain rank on the forums, you'd be able to log in using your existing login information on the wiki to then, be able to edit as you wish, within reason, of course. And I think that would help sort of community and let people share their experiences, because it gets quite out of date quite quickly as we change. We do patches every week, and things change quite quickly.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure that would be a nice update, especially for newer players who are either confused by various aspects or maybe don't have veteran players to assist them, so they're kind of looking for information. So it'll be really exciting to see when that's able to be made available for people to really start putting some time and effort into. Hopping back over to GamesBond again, at this point in Return of Reckoning's life cycle, I think everyone can agree that recent patch notes trigger quite a significant amount of player interaction on the forums. How do y'all, as the dev team and those working behind the scenes, cope with the patch notes that have drastically changed something, which ends up resulting in like overwhelming disapproval from a significant majority of the community?
All right. So uh, since there will often be patches that change a class or ability or a feature that we've all been used to like over many months or years, it's really crucial to understand that the team in general, and especially the balance team, they all read the feedback without any exception. And in a matter of fact, like we actually have to read all the posts because we monitor the forums. So we actually have to go through all the posts anyway. So it's a really proof that we read literally everything. So to give you a final answer, we are always interested in player feedback. And I just want to say, to send a message to all the players that your feedback is really important and it's really appreciated. But it also must be respectful, and it must be constructive and not based on what classes you play or hate. It should always be like it should put the community first. Yeah, and that's basically it.
All right, great. And that's, I would say for anyone listening, especially those of you I see over in Twitch chat, it's that's probably one of the most important things when interacting with any community, whether you're interacting with these wonderful guys or another video game by another company like Total War Series or something, is that if you're going to give feedback, try and, be amicable about it. Be nice about it. Nobody wants to read like a rude message. Try and do what's best and make their lives a little easier. It makes the whole world process a lot smoother, makes the world go around faster. It's just, use common sense. So, moving into some technical aspects of the game. Max, we know Warhammer Online's performance really can't be massively improved, sadly, due to the kind of the nature of this project. Would you mind explaining for those who are maybe not familiar with the reasons why that is, why Warhammer Online is kind of in the graphical and functional state that it is?
Yep, I've just sent you 2 links that you could open because I'm going to mention them in a second. So, when Mythic started working on the game, it was around 2005, 2006. Windows Vista was new. And if you wanted to support a majority of gamers, you had to support Windows XP, which didn't support, the new graphics technology, DirectX 10 plus. And the game was originally designed for a PC and Xbox 360. And I've got some pictures that I linked. These are official Electronic Arts document that War is coming to the Xbox 360. Pretty cool. And there's actually one of the developers who actually has on his sort of LinkedIn, ported the game over to the Xbox 360. How that was going to work, I don't know, but they did have a working version for the Xbox 360, which is the other image. So this is obviously a very early version of the game on the server Chaos 360. They're actually experimenting with sort of bump maps on. So this actually has sort of upgraded graphics that they decided not to go with, even though the rest of the game looks pretty bad. But it's running at 60 FPS, which is all important on an Xbox 360. So that's the sort of thing they were sort of targeting. And additionally, the game was designed to work on one processor, which was, at the time, and graphics cards that were nowhere near what they are today. So it was designed to work on, the most PCs it could, so low-end PCs from 2006, and that doesn't scale well with the current times. If we had the code to the client, we could upgrade, the rendering engine, provide better support for multi-core computers, throw out higher resolution textures, especially armor, which are usually quite low textured. And we could do lots of stuff, but at the moment, if we make changes to the game code, it's in assembly language, which is like machine code, and it's quite hard, and it takes a long time to do even the small changes. We've done some as best we sort of could, and we're always sometimes looking at it, and our eyes start to hurt. But it's something we wish we could improve, but that's sort of the technical reason behind it.
All right, fair enough. So maybe looking into something that could be improved. Are there any plans to revamp the website into something a little more modern?
So we have actually some designs that are sort of being made, but when and if they get implemented is another story. Currently, I feel the website does a really good job of how well you can jump right into the forums. And I feel like normally on gaming websites, the forums are usually tucked away under the sort of the developer's own forums or the publisher's own forums. And while it'd be good to have a more tidy website, I really like how the community stuff is, right there. And we don't need any of that, advanced account game management because we don't have, paid subscriptions or anything, and we don't have character transfers, but sort of paid facilities like the character rename. We just do that through a command in game. So whilst we're adding stuff to the current website and we are redesigning large bits of it to see how we can do it, but it is a large job in itself. And the guy who made our current website and the versions before that left the team a few years ago because he got older, had kids.
Life
the
happens.
story. Yep.
So okay, so we're definitely looking at a facelift in the distant future, but something's being worked out. All right, so let's keep things moving here. Here's a very, very popular question, but is there any chance, Max, of seeing the Skaven become playable?
So when Mythic added Skaven into the game as a kind of monster play, and they did that, I think, in the last big content in quotes patch, because it was mainly just a rework and adding of small things. No big new content came out. They dubbed it as a sort of new trick they kind of did that MMOs hadn't really done before, and I think they spoke about that at some event they went to in Germany in 2010. And while it was all cool being able to play a Skaven, it was nowhere near as how it would have been to start off as a Skaven, do the Skaven starting area, get your gear for your Skaven, visit Skaven Blight. And I think the main reason they did that was because there's a lot of effort required to build new gear sets from 1 to 40, build new zones, build new cities, all the vast amounts of abilities and quests. And it's much easier just to transform you into a Skaven with a predefined look and abilities for a keep siege. And whilst it was kind of cool, I think there's better ways to do it. And whilst we have looked into adding new stuff like that into the game, we've run into a lot of problems. And whilst if we had the code to the client and the resources to implement the stuff, we would do it. And we don't have any plans to add them in as monster play yet. So
probably not looking super great, but kind of see what the future brings. All right, War Grimnir, here's a good technical question we have. Are there any plans to make the ticketing system friendlier? Have y'all considered maybe bringing in like the Discord system and allowing those the bots they have available to make it a smoother process? What are your thoughts on that?
So the game itself has client support for a two-way ticketing system that allows players to put follow-up comments on their in-game reported issues. I don't recall if it was ever used by Mythic. Naturally, I wouldn't have ever been able to be approached by a GM because I'm above board on all that. And it is a bit buggy. Max managed to get it working. There's also work in progress for Discord notifications for GMs and any tickets are created or updated. As far as I know, we don't have anything yet for implementing emojis, however. Very sad.
All right, thanks for the answer. And we do have one more question for you, which is there any kind of system in place for checking notes that are placed against a person's account to keep track of infringements over extended period, like several months? Because the gradual punishment system for accounts, is it permanent, or does it reset after X period of having a clean record with no issues? there seems some concern that sometimes minor mistakes are escalated due to previous suspensions on those accounts.
Sounds like this question came from somebody who's intimate with this problem. So the vast majority of GM commands are logged. They require a reason when you apply any kind of hard sanction. They don't expire from your record, but we do take into account if it's a minor issue that's years old. There's no reset to clean a record, just from a factor of time. And even in the event that you create a second account, for example, we still have a bunch of different ways to tell that it's you. Ideally, if you're trying to hide from GMs because of your past history, the best thing to do is simply nothing. Just don't violate any of our rules to a degree that anybody's going to notice, and you won't be a target for GMs. They won't have a reason to find you. They won't even start looking for you. I want to be clear, it's not a word of encouragement if you're violating a permanent ban or temporary ban. Even if you're doing absolutely nothing, someone might tip off a GM that you're in game when you shouldn't be, and they will be happy to perform their duties. In the end, it really comes down to is the community wants to have a better place to play, and that's what the GM staff exists to do. There's a lot of games out there that simply don't have a very good or very active GM staff. And I would hope, at least by reputation, our team has shown that it's not one of these. We're not one of those kinds of games.
Which I'm glad for. And for those out there, don't be bad. just behave. It's not that hard.
A lot of people are for it, to be honest.
All right, so okay, so we're gonna hop back over to some balance-related questions. I know some people were interested in us re-hitting those, so lucky for y'all, we've got a few more. Starting with Dalen, related specifically to battlefields, have y'all reconsidered the AoE 24 man cap and the 30 seconds immunity from punts? There seems to be some feelings out there that decreasing it would bring a lot more new approaches, especially to those larger battles.
No, probably not. We raised the recap and feel that it's working fairly well at the current level. With the immunity timers, lowered immunity to punt would make punts and knockbacks stronger and encourage more play around that and so on, which could be strategical. But it would also mean that you would spend more of your time playing just flying around and being kind of disabled from the fight. And that's not really that fun. So we think that the current immunity timers are a pretty good compromise between the power of knockbacks and just allowing people to play the game and not be disabled and knocked all over the place all the time.
Fair enough. Thanks for the answer on that. And then we have another question for you, which is that is there a strategy being tinkered around with behind the scenes to enhance the City Siege experience? Or do you see it feasible to have it stay the way it is? Because right now, we have players that can decide whether they go in solo and more than likely aren't going to do super well, or they can form a decent warband. Those are kind of the main approaches that exist at this time.
Yes. So, we encourage people to form good warbands and not just, going solo and YOLO it. But, play as a team. That's definitely something we encourage. We will likely add some form of matchmaking to kind of promote more fun fights in cities. So, I know that there's a lot of guilds that would prefer to fight another guild warband and get a really fun fight in the city rather than just face some solo players and stomp them, which might be good for gearing up, but isn't really that much fun. But it's not really decided exactly how that will work, and it's also just not implemented yet. It's gonna take some time to implement.
All right, great. So something that we'll probably be seeing, maybe talked more about in the distant future. War Grimner, we do have a very specific balance question for you here, which is, are there any plans to rework the Slayer's Rampage? And if not, do you think it works the way it's supposed to be working, or maybe it needs to be tinkered with a little bit? And let's also go ahead and, if you have time for that or on your mind, talk about Choppas as well. Any reworks we're seeing before the end of the year?
You want Choppas too. All right, so Rampage. Rampage currently works as intended. I know it's not the answer people want to hear, but it is what it is. Whether or not it could use an adjustment will be evaluated when we specifically focus on that class. We're not going to be using forum drama as a metric for who needs balance changes next. Rampage is particularly annoying because it's been around for a very long time. The exact same ability it ever has been. We're talking 12 years since this ability was introduced. It's always worked this way.
And then
the first couple weeks of the sorry.
No, you're all good. I just want to make sure. Okay, go ahead.
The first couple weeks of the forum stirring up drama like this, we did go and take a look at both Get to the Choppa and Rampage. Unfortunately, for some, the only thing that we found in the client files for Get to the Choppa, it didn't actually include the not defendable flag, so that got removed from a bug fix. When we went and looked at Rampage, yeah, the client files back up that this is how it works. So when we do get to actually looking at these classes and going through their masteries and making sure that each mastery is appropriate for the class, we'll take a look at it then. But forum drama is not going to push that kind of balance change. Sorry. Not sorry.
Fair enough. And speaking of the reworks for these two, any potential time scale? Is it kind of a little still too far in the future to really give any potential dates?
I think the next couple of weeks, we're going to be pretty focused on getting the range squig herder changes in. So after that, we could maybe put it on the calendar at some point. But no, we don't have it planned right now.
All right, fair enough. So something to keep your eyes on for the future, folks. Okay, so bouncing again over to Twitch drops and kind of the community interaction there. Games Bond. There's been a lot of feedback threads regarding previous Twitch drop events. When is the next similar event? And can you tell us anything about what shape it might take, considering all the feedback that's been gathered about the previous efforts?
Yeah, sure. So Twitch drops have been a great experience for the team, the community, and the streamers as well. And the reason is because the reason is this amazing cooperation that happened between these three. We basically planned and launched 3 Twitch drops test events. And after every single event, we opened a huge thread where people would go and post or share their feedback and suggestions. And by the time we did the 3rd event, we made sure to implement what we gathered and learned from the community over the different feedback threads from the 1st and 2nd events. So at the end, we ended up making a great 3rd event, which received an overwhelming positive feedback. And this was honestly really satisfying for us to know that we actually delivered something that satisfied, I would say, easily 70 or 80% of the whole community.
Awesome. Do you have any maybe hints or ideas about when we might see it returning?
Yeah, sure. So the next Switch Drops event is coming back on Christmas. So it's going to be for the 12 days of Christmas. So it's going to cover New Year as well. And so we are basically talking about 12 days of constant drops, and people will not have to be restricted on only 3 days or 1 weekend. So they can skip a few days and come back the other days, and they will still get all of the rewards. And we will gather what we learned from all of these 3 previous test events. So basically regarding the shape, like if you need an answer for how will the drops or how will the rewards be given, players will have to wait for the holidays in order to see, but we have a surprise.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think we wanted to stop people watching for 72 hours straight. trying to get all their drops and focus more on maybe you could watch 2 hours today, 3 hours tomorrow, and smaller chunks over a longer period of time.
I think that will be an excellent change. I'm looking forward to Festag. This is going to be a good time. It sounds great. Speaking of the Twitch drops, though, before we move on, for Max, Twitch has recently basically implemented a Twitch drops version 2.0. Is there any plans to utilize that to improve the Twitch drop experience for the community over the past one?
So when we implemented Twitch drops 1, they were working on Twitch drops 2, and they didn't tell us about it. I think they only sort of told a select amount of game publishers. And so we implemented Twitch drops 1, and then a few weeks later they're like, Twitch drops 2, Twitch drops 1 is going to be dropped in some months. And I think that's sort of the end of January. And I think Twitch drops 2 is kind of worse than it currently is. They've taken away a lot of the ability for game developers to view the data. So the way it currently works is they tell us every minute one person is watching some stream, and then we can use some algorithms to determine, have you watched this amount of time? Have you met this criteria? Have you met this criteria? Is the random drop chance for you on this? And drops takes that away from us and forces us to use more basic metrics, and they store that data, and we just define the rules in their system. And if you're interested, this is all the public Twitch stuff on their API list. But so drops 1 is being unsupported in the end of January. I imagine the reason is because some game developers are using sort of viewing data from their players to do some kind of dodgy profiling of players because they link their account to how much time they're watching viewing streams, and I'm sure you could get some Cambridge Analytica metrics from that. But I don't know that for sure.
Ruin it for the rest of us. Classic. All right. Well, we appreciate the answer, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what y'all have in store for us to celebrate Festag in the Warhammer universe. So let's hop over to City Sieges for just a minute. Dalen, are there any raw ideas or even just plans in general to change how City Sieges are triggered?
No, so not at the moment. I mean, I know there's been some proposals about having scheduled sieges and that sort of stuff, but we think it takes away a bit from the importance of the RBR campaign, that it's like a player-driven campaign that triggers the city sieges, and they're the finale of that campaign. We would, however, probably want to make some tweaks to how the campaign works, so it's less of a stalemate in prime time, and by effect have more city sieges happening during prime time and not so high percentage of them happening in kind of off hours.
Fair enough. But are there any plans perhaps to have city sieges more available to more players by, say, increasing the queue timer? Do you or Max have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so not at the moment, no. So the immediate problem with that is that you would be able to kind of participate in the same city siege on multiple characters. We could implement some better lockout mechanisms for that, of course, but people also have multiple accounts where they would probably do that and just split their characters on 3 different accounts, and every time there's a city siege they would participate 3 times and get triple the rewards. So yeah, that's maybe, but it has some issues like that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, especially in chat, are talking about the contribution system in cities. It is, we do hear you. It is something we are looking at. And I think that some of the changes we made to the scenario scoreboard, where it shows the healing, the damage, and now the protection, is one of the metrics we're going to sort of use to sort of put into the contribution system. So there is a plan to sort of make it better. I think the reason why it's implemented how it was we took the design basically from Mythic of how these cities were going to work, and it wasn't necessarily how people, we sort of discovered playing them. It's very RVR focused. There's lots of tactics they're using, and I don't think we sort of comprehended the amount of organization and dedication people were putting in towards it. So we're going to be using a lot of those metrics soon.
Awesome. That sounds great. I'm sure a lot of people are really looking forward to that. Moving on to just RVR in general, and away from cities specifically. Dalen, is there any plan to make upgrading medallions and emblems possible even beyond Conquer, even through a harsh and costly multiplayer system? For example, having 20 Vanquishers able to go into one Invader.
So the short answer to that is no, not really. No plans to do that. I mean, one thing we could potentially do is to make a Vanquisher and Oppressor boots and gloves bind and equip, just like the lower tier sets. But that's also not really something we've decided if we're gonna do or not. And I mean, then you could use all those Vanq medallions to, give gear to alts or sell them on the auction house to get money.
I don't really mind that idea for putting the boots and gloves on bind and equip. I think the reason that they weren't was because when they were introduced, it was the most powerful set that you could get your hands on at the time. We have consistently said the content you do is the content that you're rewarded for. So Invader comes from forts, and if all you do all day is grind RVR, taking keeps and flipping zones, that's great. But if you never touch a fort, then you don't get those Invader tokens. Now, we have recently introduced shards that can be converted into these tokens, which you get, I think it's 5-1 or something like that, once you're sufficiently high enough rank, and you can get them through RVR. The reason the upgrade system exists for RVR content is that all RVR content is effectively the same thing. It just depends on what level you are for what rewards you get. Forts and cities, clearly not the same thing. You have to have a much higher level of personability to work with your realm and with your groups to coordinate and win those versus RVR.
Appreciate the answers on that. So now moving even more towards open RVR and less about the rewards, for Dalen here, what are the thoughts on having objectives, especially those RVR zone objectives, feature more heavily in the importance of RVR, such as making the battle objectives heavier in campaigns and able to steer the direction of how a campaign is going?
Yes. So, I mean, yeah, we would like to do that. We have done some small tweaks that make them a little bit more important. Like over the last 6 months, there's been some tweaks in that direction. But we're not exactly sure how we're going to change that. We've also discussed, some broader kind of campaign changes and improvements. And also another thing that we recently introduced is the guild keep claims and the keep upgrade system, which is still like very, very basic and kind of the bare bones of that system. But now the system is in place, and we would like to do a lot more with that system. And then, but the question is also like, how does that tie into all of this? And so
definitely sounds like a lot of work, but it's exciting to hear that objectives at some point in the future could be playing a much more significant role in how players are trying to coordinate taking control in a campaign. So thanks for the answer on that. Max, we have a question here of what is y'all's team's approach when it comes to the faction lock timer? Do you think it should be harsher? Do you like where it's at? Do you think it should be softer? What are your thoughts on that?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mythic only allowed players to have characters on each realm on the same server for the first time when the two last Russian servers merged in around 2010. And then they added the sort of faction lock timer for that. And before that, you'd have to, play Order on one server, Destruction on another server. We, from day one, with 0 players online, allowed cross-realm characters. The server was mostly for testing at that point. It wasn't really a game. So years later, when people properly started getting, to play the game and it becoming more of a game again, it became sort of a problem. And people might be annoyed with, a 24-hour lockup period straight away. It's not like they could choose to play their order characters on another server because there aren't any. We've also taken into consideration that it is a free-to-play game. People can have multiple accounts, and it doesn't. If it becomes too inconvenient for people people will work around it. We're not speaking about how we track that. So, at first, I think a year ago, we added the 90-minute lockout, which I think was a good starting point. And ideally, we will raise it at some point. Even better, ideally, would have a load more players, and we could open another server, in the States or something, and then extend the lockout periods longer. But that's other factors. But I think at some point we will plan to sort of raise it. To when and when, that's another question.
Ooh, I like the idea of a US server. That would be cool. All right, so let's move on to sort of some of the final questions before we take a look at the chat and try and pick something out from that wall of text. But for each of you, just briefly, if you wouldn't mind, what would you say is the most satisfying implementation of work y'all have done that you've experienced and allowed the players to experience so far?
So for me, it's probably the city sieges. They're basically, the way they're implemented and the way Mythic sort of implemented, they're just basically a mega scenario. So we had to sort of revamp the scenario system to implement them, and all the sort of technical stuff worked slightly different for city sieges, and it all had to sort of work perfectly. I think we've had 20 plus instances at some point, so it has to work simultaneously 20 times perfectly. And if instance gets stuck, the campaign doesn't finish, and then it doesn't reset. And we had some of those issues at the beginning. We did a couple of tests on the live server when we first sort of started wrapping up them, and we did them a few times before the sort of before we actually released them. And I think that was really exciting.
Yeah, so for me, there's a lot of things, really. A lot of smaller fixes, but one thing that maybe stands out a little bit is, I would probably say, is implementing the whole kind of protection score and the medals system in scenarios, which I think, definitely improved the scenarios quite a lot and made it more fun to play tanks in scenarios, and also gives people hard numbers on some of that stuff.
And Secrets wrote an answer for this, which is he worked a lot on the performance fixes and server optimization. And we have a YouTube video of 1,100 players in the same area in Tier 1 during the stress test event, which was incredible. Mythic's biggest RVR engagement, according to one of the former engineers, was about 800, 900 players at a keep. So I think we've made big grounds on this sort of, and a lot of games these days also struggle with having that many people in an area at once. A lot of them struggle. So this is a video with that. You can't. The client only loads a certain amount. If we could zoom out more, it would show more areas. But this was a huge battle. We had debolstering on, so people could come from level 40 and their level would be pushed down to level 16 with restrictions on abilities and things. So those are some big fights.
And for me, there are two things. In fact, the last one was the ability to be able to introduce new content in the client, like weapons or Garden of Quaff, for example. But fixing some existing affix or models. But the most satisfying implementation for me, maybe the answer will be out of the line, is just to see players coming more and more in this server. I still remember the first day we were 20, 50, and I never expected to see more than 100 people in this project. So for me, the best experience we let other players to experience is to play together. In fact, it's not from our side; it's from player side, in my opinion.
Well, those are just some absolutely lovely answers to hear, and I know, at least on my experience, it's been wild to see how many people are playing and active. Like it's so amazing and chaotic, and just brings back all of the best memories even though this is actually better than it was back in the day, at least as far as I'm concerned. It's been an absolute blast, and y'all are just doing such a kick-ass job. You should, of course, be incredibly proud of your work. Moving on to another question we have, but this time for GamesBond specifically. What kind of plans do you have to promote the game enough to hopefully bring in even larger waves of new players?
Basically, we are always seeking new ways and possibly repeat old successful ways of sharing the project with more Warhammer Online lovers. However, considering that we don't actually have and don't even plan on having an advertisement budget, we are limited to organic reach. Organic reach means that we can grow only thanks to initiatives and support coming from these initiatives and support. They come from awesome people like you, our lovely community streamers, and good friends in the blogging industry. So we basically just share our content with people like you, the streamers, video gaming bloggers, and we appreciate any support they give us.
Awesome. So, I mean, for those of you listening, of course, the important thing is that if you meet people you think would enjoy the game, introduce them to it. Do what you can to foster the community and help grow it and help these grassroots situations just keep the player base ever growing, because the more people, the better it gets. I mean, that's just kind of the way MMOs tend to work, isn't it? Moving forward, as we kind of near the end here, we have a question here, which is there any idea that the team really wanted to go forward with and implement into the game, but unfortunately you just couldn't due to various technical difficulties? And we're aiming that at Max and Yali.
So this could be a long list for things that were removed in updates, such as the guild heraldry and the guild captured keeps. So before you could go into a guild, capture the keep. You can do that now, but then your guild heraldry would be on the banners and things, and it was that sense of pride that your realm your guild would have, and that was removed and replaced with stuff for the Skaven invasion. And they could have easily not removed it, but just not used it. But they decided to not do that. And a lot of other ideas get shut down before they've really been thought through, such as adding a third realm or sending more data for the user interface, like statistics, adding more classes, new cities, new maps. However, we are slowly breaking down these barriers. And around 2 to 3 years ago, we added client patching. We're able to adjust abilities in the client and stuff. And then around 2 years ago, we restored a scenario which was removed from the beta, which is Black Crag Keep, which was nearly complete. We had to fix a load of the water and the map, create a map for it, change a lot of the sort of fixtures, the flies that go around the sort of bog. And we've added new weapons for every class, which we modeled from scratch. And this year we added a complete new zone, which was sort of a test for us adding our own complete new zone, which was the arena of Kuap. Is that how you say it? And we have things that we wouldn't be able to do a year ago coming out soon due to things we've developed. And all of these things we spend months and months trying to work out how they work and how to do them before we can build the tools to do them. And whereas if we had access to the original tools and code, we could have done a lot more fantastic things in that time.
Yeah, otherwise, as Max said, original tools have been lost in the days. Game was closed, and we've been working with leftovers since then. Doing what we actually want has always been blocked by that. However, it is also important to add, and over the many years I've been developing return of new. We've learned, implemented, and adapted new tools and made our work to make our work easier. Sorry for my English, but there are still a lot of barriers, like, for example, creating new terrain. We don't know how to do that, actually. Managing lights, not very easy. And as said Max earlier, working on animations and things like this. But we have a lot of possibilities now. Now it's all a matter of time and understanding of the client.
Wonderful. Thanks for the answers, guys. Yala, we do have a community question here that I think you would be an excellent person to answer. But at this point, y'all have been working on this project for almost 7 years, which is a pretty extreme amount of time.
It is.
Do you find yourself kind of hitting a wall? Like, are you kind of asking for the sweet release of death at this point? Like, how are you feeling about your experience here?
I think some people asked if it was exhausting. Yes, it is. Not necessarily for the reason one might have in mind. We have started with a project with passion about this game, and this passion is still here today after 7 years. However, when we started, we forgot to account for the player who were as passionate as we are, and with different passionate people. Each one would push his version of the perfect Warhammer Online project to the other. Over 7 years, the project went up and down, mostly due to drama. And this drama, a drama was not caused out of hatred, but by out of passion for the game, as I mentioned. But in the end, and even in many of us have gone through thousands of hours working as volunteers for this amazing project, we are always glad that this game is available again for Warhammer lovers to experience. So it is exhausting completely. But is it worth it? Totally. And are we going to let go? Never. Well, personally, my role in the team will drastically decrease by the end of this year. Sorry, guys. My personal career will require more time. And I shall answer that call. I'm confident in the team. I see a lot of people arguing about X or Y, or I don't know, but I'm confident in this team. They have found a good rhythm, and they are working in a smart way. I will always remember and appreciate those who took part of it, everywhere, every of them, through ups and downs. And I thank everyone in the past, the present, in the future, who will take some of his free time for this project. Voilà.
What an absolutely beautiful answer. I love that. Big claps in chat. I already see, I can see a lot of people definitely seem to adore you from all the comments that I'm reading. But thank you for the answer. That was wonderful. Really appreciate that, Yali. Max, we do have a question here from the community about, do you have any plans in the near or far future? Do y'all have any thoughts on ever doing a reset or a wipe?
So no, we don't have plans to do that. I remember a few years ago, maybe in 2015, we did a sort of a character deletion of characters that hadn't logged in for a year. But yeah, we don't plan on do that. We've optimized the way we load our characters, so once the character is deleted, it's not really deleted. It's just kind of hidden away, and the server can, if you don't log into the character, it just forgets about them. And we have sorted. I've done, if a character hasn't logged in, I think we did it a few months ago. For 3 years, we basically took their name back and put it into the pool of names. But if they logged in again, they got a chance to rename their character, and if their original name was available, they could use that. But this question, I think, is kind of focused on people want to, restart the game, experience it again. I mean, if we were going to do that, I'd kind of hope it would be with a fresh server, keeping the old one up. I mean, and consider doing, like, if we considered doing that during the Peon rush, but due to constraints, we decided on focusing on optimizing and making this the only server we have handle all of those players, which I think was a good investment. But if we were to open a new one, we could, and that's something we could look to in the future. But we're not planning on doing a wipe or reset on Martin Square server.
Awesome. I appreciate the answer on that. Man, I know I'm going to be hell-bent on trying to get enough of a community going to get another server. That sounds like so much fun. The last question we've got for y'all before we'll be turning our attention to the chat. So chat, if y'all have questions, you better start trying to get organized into getting a few with all of y'all behind it. And this is kind of for me personally would y'all ever be interested as a team in the private server gaming official support from the likes of Games Workshop Or do you think that it's better off, either as an experience or for safety reasons or what have you, as a beloved fan-created project?
So, I'm going to go on to a bit of the reason why Warhammer shut down in this bit. So I know a lot of people have said that Games Workshop were the ones who decided to stop Warhammer Online. But from what I've heard from reliable sources, it's like Games Workshop, they really loved Warhammer Online, and they wanted Mythic to carry on running it. And they had a really good relationship with Mythic right until the end. And a lot of, Carrie Goosecoast mentioned that in her letter, and other developers, I think Mark Jacobs speaks about that openly. But I also heard that EA had planned on closing Mythic for a while, and it was just a coincidence that the Warhammer license was up for renewal, and they decided not to go for it. And a while later, EA went to shut down Ultima and Dark Age of Camelot, preparing for Mythic shutdown. But apparently Rob Denton, who was the COO of Mythic, who had previously left after the buyout, contacted the CEO of EA asking if he could set up what would become Broadsword to take over development of the games. And apparently they discussed Warhammer, but decided against it as the game had already shut down and the subscribers had been, effectively unsubscribed. And there's also a quote I found on a Dark Age of Camelot website, which was originally from a BioWare forum, which no longer exists, which is a quote from Games Workshop, apparently, which says, sort of when taking bits out of it here because it was quite a long. It says, we are considering the possibilities for war going forward. We're thinking about it, and it has made us try to think if there are any other viable options. Having said that, I don't want to instill any false hope here. I think the likelihood of war continue is pretty remote. EA are finished with it, and Games Workshop are not a video game company. So the only possible option would be to have someone else run it. And that's likely to be complicated to resolve due to the various IP issues and the difficult commercial viability of the game. But they are trying a number of routes before they give up. So I don't know. That could have been, someone could have just made that up, but I have no reason to sort of doubt it. And I spoke before about the troubles about all the tools we're building, and the difficulties working out how the tools need to work, and having access to those from if we became sort of an official thing would allow us to do so much more faster. We could take all the original artwork, release the high resolution texture packs because they made all the artwork better than it was and squashed it down to fit in the game. We can make the game run better on modern hardware. We could finish the Blood Hunt Vampire Count expansion pack that they were working on at some point after Tomb of the Vulture Lord. We could even build those elf cities, build new armor, races, careers. The possibilities would be endless. Even Chaos Dwarfs, maybe, if they even exist. And I don't think it's impossible, you're right. Games Workshop already works with publishers like GOG or Good Old Games, they're called, who get these resources I mentioned to bring a large number of old Warhammer games to new machines like Shadow of the Horned Rat, which was from 1995. Now, it would be slightly different as we aim to continue development, but it's not unrealistic. We've rebuilt the servers. I think we show what it sort of takes. But at the end of the day, it's better to have Warhammer Online as a beloved fan project than not have it at all.
Well, thank you for the answer on that. I know, it's kind of a spooky experience when you're kind of operating in an area where there's not exactly answers. It's kind of just a blank void of hoping not to step on any invisible toes. But, y'all have been doing such a phenomenal job. I know I personally very deeply hope that one day, I can't imagine Games Workshop is not aware of the project, but I hope one day that they come out in support of it. That would be amazing. But
we haven't. Games Workshop don't talk openly about it, but you have people like Mark Jacobs, who speaks on stream about it quite often. He mentions us. We've had other developers contact us, and we've spoken to them, and they're all really pleased about it and things like that. So from that may be different when you go further up to EA, but Mythic and the people who worked on the game love it and love being able to show to their kids now, go into the game and I built that 12 years ago and things like that. And I think that's quite an important part too, keeping it alive forever. Paul Barnett has also popped into the game. There's actually a model of him that was unknown to the art team that someone had put in, and we put his character in game for April Fools, and he spotted it on Twitter and popped into one of the Zarbix's streams, I think, and tipped him quite a big tip, which was, I'm jealous.
Well, I'm just very pleased to know that there's that really positive interaction, and I hope the future just continues to open up more doors for you guys and allow y'all to implement even more and wonderful things. Before we do, do y'all have any closing thoughts? Does anyone have anything they'd like to add, or maybe saw something in the chat that caught your attention you'd like to address real quick as we're kind of in the closing moments here?
I mean, I want to say, well, a big thanks to everyone on the Return of Reckoning team, from everyone who does the smallest parts, game masters, and just writing stuff, helping out on the forums, to the developers and all the other development team, to the people who've been here for years. Thanks to the Mythic team who made this wonderful game, and Games Workshop who allowed them to make it in the first place. And thanks to all the players for being as awesome as you are, because without you guys, we wouldn't be here.
Awesome. And I think the only last question I have, which kind of touches back on the question earlier, I'm just curious if there are any. I just like picking for my own excitement. Do y'all have any thoughts on a time scale for when we may see those new dungeons or in-game dungeons implemented, the Lost Vale, Hunter's Vale, and maybe even seeing the Land of the Dead stuff come back? Is there any thoughts on when those might happen? Because I know I am way too excited about those.
So I know a lot of players ask for, timescales, and if we were a development team who were, actually doing this as our job, they'd be really entitled to. But I mean, the truth is, some people think the team's much bigger than it is. There's only maybe, 4, coders who work on the game, I'd say week to week, not even day to day. And there's small amounts of other teams, so and we're all doing it in our spare time. If some family issue comes up or personal issue, that's the priority. If you've got to work, you've got to work, and so people's time schedules change, and we're working on them. One is coming to sort of the end. We've got everything. We just need to finish the scripting. So I don't really want to give a time, just because it puts pressure on some of these developers, and I think we've had in the past where we've given a time frame, and it stresses them out, and I don't think it's fair when the people are doing it out of passion. So we want to get it right, and we want to get it at a time which fits within these volunteers' lives.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely the right decision. I think if there's anything we're all learning from CG Projekt Red over there when it comes to Cyberpunk, don't give timescales until you're done. It's just, just don't hurt yourself like that. But I want to thank you all so much for coming out and doing this Q&A for the community. Of course, thank you very much for inviting me to host the event. It was quite enjoyable. If we could please get a lot of hearts and claps in chat, thanking the devs for taking time out of their busy schedules to come speak with us all, I would really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I hope everyone learns some interesting information, either about changes to the content, improving on various things, and of course, exciting potential new things that we'll see in the future. Feel free for anyone on here. The VOD will be up on Twitch, or the YouTube video of this interview will be saved as just a regular video, so people can go through it and timestamp things they find interesting and be able to get all the answers to information there, so that'll be publicly available. Thank you all very much again for coming by. This was a blast. You're all absolutely wonderful. I know I personally owe you such a debt of gratitude for bringing back such a exciting and nostalgic part of my childhood growing up. I mean, Warhammer is my life. It's what I do for a living, though I focus on Warhammer lore and, of course, all the Warhammer Fantasy games. But this was such a highlight of an experience growing up for me, and to have it back, not only playable but vastly superior to how it was live, with new content and all sorts of improved features. It's been beyond a blessing, and I hope you all can feel an incredible amount of pride and satisfaction in having provided that experience for thousands of people at this point, and it's only going to keep growing as we head into the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, so that's going to be it for us. I really appreciate you all coming by. I do apologize again for our weirdness in the beginning. There's some weird stuff going on between OBS and YouTube's new streaming service. I'll keep trying to figure that out, but we got through it. Life goes on. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you guys next time. To answer that quick question, I see in Twitch chat, the developers make it really, really clear, very, very stridently, they're not interested in having any kind of financial donations of any sort, of any kind. It just kind of adds a layer of mess that they very understandably don't want to deal with. So don't worry about that. Just play the game, participate in the community, get on the forums and their Discord server, provide feedback, participate in the events. That's the best way you can help support the devs. We'll see you all next time. Thank you all again for coming on. And that's us for today. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.